Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Welcome to today's podcast with my buddy, Pastor Mike. He is experiencing incredible growth at his church, and we're talking about how every new level of growth requires change. Things have to change. Systems, staffing, how we structure things. And every time we grow, things have to change. And we're talking about that today with my buddy, Mike. I also want to remind you before we jump into it to check out churchboom.org. You might want to check out our Church Boom University, an amazing platform for you to be a part of. It is a development platform for pastors. When you sign up and you become part of it, you get resources sent to your house every quarter. You have a platform to come and discuss challenges that you're having online. You have master classes that you can go online and check out how to grow your church, or how to get unstuck, or how to create generosity, or how to create a leadership ladder. You've got webinars that are just specially designed just for Church Boom University members. So go to churchboom.org and join Church Boom University, because we should always be learning as leaders. Hey, let's jump into our conversation now with my friend, Pastor Mike. Good to see you, man. How can I serve you today, Mike?
Well, I have a couple questions. As a church, we're experiencing some pretty radical growth right now, and God has really been blessing us, and we're about to add a fourth service, thinking we'll launch that on Easter Sunday, but based on the last 4 Sundays, we may have to launch it earlier than that. But my question is, we are at pretty much max capacity in our building, and you've been here with us several times. So as a leader, how do you know when it's time to stop adding services and really make prep for, man, we got to move and we got to jump into something bigger?
Yeah, that's awesome. First of all, I love that problem. Those are the kind of problems we all like to solve. Mm-hmm. I think that you've got to, when you start hitting 3 and then go into 4 services, and I've been to your building, I've seen, the situation there. I think that when you're at 3 going to 4, I would start looking into that now. That doesn't mean the answer is going to be now, right. But you got to start looking into solutions. Now, I don't know what those solutions are. Again, I don't have memory of all the land. If there's land behind you, we can extend another 400 seats, mm-hmm. Or if it's, man, we need a whole new building, or we need to really go all in with multi-site more than we've done in the past, and so we've got to build that up and get the right leaders. And because some guys, I think, tried multi-site, but they didn't go all in with it. Some people need to build a building. Some people, and I think you have to decide, because when you think about it, there's a few options. It's build a new building, renovations, multi-site. But whatever you do, you got to go all in with it. But when you're pushing 3 going to 4 services, I'm not saying that that's the end of your growing, because I've been as high as 6 weekend services at a campus. Wow. And that's all. Yeah, I don't even know what I was saying half the time. Yeah, it's back to the anchor man. I don't know what he's going to say. Right. Anybody listening to this podcast, me and Mike share a love for Anchorman, but we got up to 6, and it was just like, man, it's exhausting, because you have exhausting with leaders, you have exhausting with staff. But if you're 3 going to 4, I don't think the solution has to happen today, but I do think you have to think about, what are we going to do? Okay. And so when you hear that, out of curiosity, what are the thoughts that come to your mind?
Well, we've been having some discussion already. Like this year, what we're going to plan to do, we owe about just under $500,000 on our current mortgage. So the goal this year is to pay that completely off.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we want to be debt free at the end of this year, so that enables us to move forward into this expansion for next year. Mm-hmm. And so, our community is about 40,000. It's not very big. I've looked around at possible empty buildings. There's really nothing. So we're probably looking at purchasing land and building something. And I think people are excited about that. We haven't started anything with a capital campaign.
Yeah.
In fact, I just talked to one of our finance guys last night and said maybe maybe we just need to have an introductory conversation with an architect,
Yep.
you know. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or you can guide me on something better than that, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I would. Again, introductory conversations, a lot of those conversations are free. You don't have to spend a lot of money to have a conversation. You can have a conversation to at least get, when what are we really looking at? How
Right.
much is this really going to cost? Because it is a big thing to take on. You're talking several $1,000,000. Of
Right.
course, you know that. You're talking several $1,000,000. And, there's an old saying, Rick Warren used to always say, we shape the building and the building shapes us.
Mm,
And so it's like, oh, we shaped this big old building. Now it shapes you. How you do ministry, where you spend money because you don't have any money. And I've seen guys do that where they get in and it's like, man, that payment is huge. And everything is swallowed up in making that payment. And I'm not saying not to do it. What I'm saying is you want to explore every possibility, because I've watched guys make that mistake of getting into a $5 million property and they end up having some $33,000, $35,000 payment.
mhm.
And it seems like they can't hire anybody. They can't do program. They can't do, whatever they want to do, because everything is swallowed up into that mortgage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
families do that, where it's like they live and die by a mortgage. And then we
Right.
do that as a church.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to do that. Because although our church is growing, financially, we're growing numerically, but not yet financially, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
Yep.
So there's some work to be done on that end as well. But yeah, I don't want to get into a payment that is going to handcuff us,
Yeah.
not allow us to be us. And
Hmm.
so those are, things that weigh on my mind and my heart, and praying through that.
Yeah.
Just to know what are some of those next steps to have. And then my second question to you would be, what's the best way to begin to share those things with the congregation? I've already started with our leadership teams. So our
Yeah.
leadership teams are aware of these conversations, but how do you begin on a Sunday to just share that we're growing and now we need to figure out what's next?
Yeah. I think, well, you've shared with your leaders, and I'm assuming yes or no, but then you drop down to your volunteers,
Hmm.
and that the meeting for the meeting is the most important meeting. You got to meet with the leaders, you got to meet with the volunteers. Otherwise, you go in and you just kind of stir up the hornet's nest if you don't do
Right,
that.
right.
So after your board and your staff, then you go to your leaders, then you go to your volunteers. You make sure everybody kind of has an open conversation. I personally, and I've done it before, I feel like. I feel like those conversations are letting people in. I feel
Mhm.
like those conversations are healthy. I think some people shy away from them. We're not committing to anything. We're not saying that this is exactly what we're going to do. I would definitely wouldn't do that. I
Right.
would do it more of, look, we have one of the greatest problems we could have. We have a growing problem. And anytime there's growth, it creates change. And I always love to give illustrations to the house, kind of like the mortgage of the house. Kind of like, hey, man, you live in a 3-bedroom house and you add 5 kids. That's, you're probably thinking like, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to fix this? You have to consider some options. And I think it's so healthy to talk to the church and just say we're having growing problems, which is a great thing. We're seeing people come to Christ, which is a great thing. And we do not want to get in the way of what God is doing.
Mm.
I don't know, as your pastor, what that means. I don't know if we need to expand this building, buy another building, buy land and build. I don't know what it's going to mean. And I personally would highly recommend that you don't pigeonhole yourself into this, like, we're going to buy land. Like, I would not say that.
Right.
Or even I would just use that in one of 4 or 5 possibilities, because
Mhm.
we don't know what God's going to do. If
Right.
the shopping center shuts down and someone hands you the key, that changes everything.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, well, that we didn't see that coming. But we know God's going to take care of it. We know there's a promised land. We know that God's going to help us do it because it's his church and it's his people. But I think that having those conversations with the leaders on a somewhat regular basis, with the volunteers on a somewhat regular basis, and even with the church every few months, I think is a healthy thing. I don't think it has to be a whole message, but I think it can be a kind of a talk from the pastor's heart for a few minutes.
Mhm.
I've been there where I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I just know we're growing and we got to do something. So please be praying with us. Please allow God to give us the right situation. And it does a couple of things. One, it puts it out there and allows people to pray about it and join you in that. But also, it allows anybody sitting in the audience that has the ability to help fix this situation, lets them know. And I've had that.
Okay.
I've brought it up, and someone comes up, hey, when we get there, let me know. Then I meet with them, and they're like, well, here's what I could do. I'm like, well, that's about halfway there.
That'd be amazing.
And I've had that happen where I was like, I didn't even know this guy was going to our church. We were at some point running thousands, whatever, at a campus. I don't know everybody, but there's some guy sitting back there that's like, yeah, I can take care of that, or I can take care of 50% of that. And but just purely letting them know, I saw God do that, and He's done it more than once.
Yeah.
So I think that's helpful as well. I think people do want to be a part of the solution as long as they know the problem.
How often should I share something like that? Is it Sunday after Sunday, or is it just periodically discuss the vision, right? And everything that you just said, is that should be during offering time? Should I make sure it's in a sermon? Is it quarterly?
Yeah, I would do it at this stage, right now, at this stage, not a different stage, but at this stage, I would be doing that every couple months.
Okay.
And I think you can break it up. I don't think it's important whether it's, hey, during the offering time or during, before you start your message, or it might be built into the message, and you might be talking about taking the next step in life and faith and all that. And just like I mentioned 2 months ago, we're praying. What is God going to do? You just kind of bring it up. You just want to keep it in front of the people, not in a panic mode, but in more of a careful consideration of prayer mode.
Okay.
But I've done that before where I was like, man, something's coming. We're going to have to do something. And so probably a year to 15 months before we pulled the trigger on anything, I just kept bringing it in front of the people. Letting them know we're not sure yet, or we're just praying about it, and we're not sure, we're not ready. We've got some other things we need to do, but we need God to open up the floodgates, and we need God to do something. So please join me in prayer. Please be praying. Please ask God, to help. And again, you're also letting people know we have a major issue.
Yeah.
Because the answer is always in the house, Mike.
Yeah.
It's always in the house.
Yeah.
And you just don't know, what God will do and who's sitting there. And you just don't know what's going to happen. A church that I'm doing executive coaching for right now, I almost the same thing where I was like, bring up the need, about a year ago, bring up the need. And it was about $1.7 million need, 1.7 need. Mm-hmm. And he calls me up out of nowhere. This is about 4 weeks ago, calls me up out of nowhere, and he says, hey, he goes, I'm holding in my hand a $1 million check.
Come on.
He goes, some guy, doesn't hardly ever comes to our church, just happened to be there. I was like, I can help with that. He goes, now we're down to $700,000. I'm like, there you go.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, you're welcome for the check. And
Right.
I'm a giver. I try to be generous.
Right. That's awesome. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Anyway. I think of a book I read a couple of years ago, Canoeing in the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. And there he talks to Lewis and Clark, and we've never been this way before.
Yes.
And how do we venture out into the unknown off the charted map? And that's kind of where we're at as a church right now. We're venturing off into the unknown, but I have resources such as yourself that I really want to make sure it's been done before, so I know I can follow patterns.
Yeah. Now, I want to encourage you. It's not so much about money, but because I love you, I love your family, I love the church. You guys always feel like I'm at home when I'm there. Is stay ahead of the bell curve. Mm-hmm. You're seeing incredible growth right now. God's doing awesome things, but always remember, Mike, and I just told another pastor this, momentum is an amazing thing, but it has two things that are true. Number one, it is the great exaggerator. And number two, it hides weakness.
Wow.
Momentum always does that.
It
is the great exaggerator. It makes us appear better than we are, and it hides weakness. Excuse me. And so, because I don't want that. I don't want any plateauing. I want this thing to keep going and going and going and going and going. Let's get this thing. I want us to keep going up into the right and moving. So because I say that, momentum hides weakness, and it is definitely the great exaggerator. It always makes us feel better than we really are. When it hides weakness, we don't end up working on the leadership, the pipeline, the thing we know has been missing. We don't work on volunteer recruiting. We don't work on, okay, we're trying to get 40 new volunteers every month or 20 new volunteers every month. We don't work on the generosity culture. We don't work on whatever, fill in the blank, our systems, our strategy, our follow-up. Is it going right? Are we doing right? Is our invite culture working, or is people just showing up because of some other church down the street that closed? Because sometimes that happens. You're like, no. Right. Then we think we have an invite culture. You really don't. So it's like you got to look and start lifting up the hood a bit and going, okay, we're going great. But a great leader sees further and faster and farther than anybody else.
Amen. Yeah.
And so you're able to look down the road and go, okay, if we're going to keep this momentum up, we better handle these things right now. And I don't even know what those things are. You and I haven't talked about that, but explore them.
Okay.
Because I've seen this and then this. I've seen it over and over and over. And I keep telling guys when they're on this, I'm like, it hides weakness. It's the great exaggerator.
Oh, good.
Keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to do this if you don't keep an eye on it. You have to see this. Everybody else is like, what are we working on? It's going great. It's like, no, we're working on it because we see what's coming. Plateau's coming if we don't get ahead of it.
Come on. Yeah. Really
and got to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Okay.
Have your team think about, like, guys, what's missing? What if someone came in and lifted the hood on this church? What would they say is missing? Let's go down the trail. Leadership, volunteer, culture, mission, follow-up, generosity, strategy, speed of engagement. Like, let's just go through it all. Okay. And let's figure out what's missing here.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I would encourage you to think about doing. Because again, momentum's awesome, but it's the great exaggerator and hides weakness.
I never looked at it that way, and it's so true. Yeah. So to add then to this, we're also multi-site, and our second campus is doing well, but we're already thinking about our third campus. So how do you know? I mean, we're juggling all this, and God's blessed us, and we've developed a lot of strong leadership. Yep. How do you know when it's time to launch that next campus?
Oh man, I think that sometimes it's timing, and sometimes I think it's opportunity. Okay. You're at a position where you're going to a forced service, so I think it's a great time to look if you have a few things in place. But I do think that there's a checklist. I call it traffic lights. There's a checklist you have to look at, and you got to make sure all those traffic lights turn green. And so anytime you're looking at starting a big program or starting a campus, you want to move yourself through some checklists. Now, again, I think opportunity falls into our lap sometimes. It's like, well, I wasn't expecting to start a church there. It happened, and that happens. I think God just does that, but the other part of it is, man, do we have momentum? A lot of people start multi-site for arrogance, for, hey, look, I got 5 sites or whatever. I think it has to come out of momentum. It's got to come out of need. You're in that need where you have, the possibility you got X amount of people, 1,200 people at a campus. It's like, well, could we take 100? Mm-hmm. Do we have that? But you have to look and ask questions like, do we have the finances to pull that off? Do we have the leadership to pull that off? Do we have the core? Will this affect any other area of our ministry? I like coming up with 6, 7, 8 questions, Mike, that I know, hey, team, on these questions, the light has to turn green.
Yeah.
And if the light doesn't turn green, we're not ready. If 4 lights are green and 2 are red, we're not ready. Even though we feel like we want to do it, even though we feel like, well, let's do it, man. We were charging the hill. We're going to do it. We're not going to do this until we make the lights turn green. Okay. A couple things is, number one, it keeps things in check so you don't end up just starting things randomly.
Yeah.
But it also, and it slows you down to kind of think about wisdom, but it also lets you know what you're working on. We got 6 traffic lights, 4 are green, 2 are red. We need to work on the 2 that are red. We know exactly what we have to work on. Now, I will say this with multi-site, because I think that a lot of guys have to make a shift. Most people are looking for the next campus pastor, but they're not thinking about the next campus staff. That's different. We're looking for the guy. Okay, but reality is, if we are following a leadership ladder, we are apprenticing people at the campus. Like, we don't just have one children's pastor. We got 2 or 3 underneath. We don't have just one youth pastor. We got 2 or 3. We don't have just one worship leader. We got 2 or 3. Where we look and we say, oh, no, we're going to start a campus 10 miles away. Okay, now I think there's ways of doing that. How many people come from that zip code, all that stuff. Okay, if we sent 100 people over there, we've got, not only do we have the campus pastor, we have the campus staff. And the staff that I look at personally is the campus pastor, worship pastor, children's pastor, assimilation pastor.
Okay.
Those are the 4 major ones I look at. Yeah. And I think in my mind, if we're not financially ready and we don't have those people in place, then I don't want to launch.
Okay.
Because I don't want to launch and struggle. I want to launch and win.
Right. Okay.
So those are some different thoughts towards that.
Yeah.
But think about traffic lights. What questions would you need to ask yourself? Not only for multi-site, just any major program. What 5, 6, 7, 8 questions would you need to always ask your team and say, okay, if these lights don't turn green, we don't move forward.
Okay.
Just like in a car. Number 1. Number 2 is that statement of we're not looking for the next campus pastor, we're looking for the next campus staff. That means that our team has got to be raising up people that are just as good as them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do that and you can just pump out campuses. But if you don't do that, I always say leadership and money. That's what it comes down to. Do you got the leadership? Do you got the money? So anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those are the questions I had for you today. And,
that's awesome.
We're excited. We're there, and just need a little bit of guidance to get us above that. But I love what you're saying about staying ahead of the bell curve. Yeah. Always looking beyond what's currently happening. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And don't forget to get with your team and talk about weakness. Talk about things that momentum covers.
Okay.
It blinds us. Don't let it blind you, man, because it's the thing that will create plateau.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Good talking with you, man. Thanks. All right, buddy. Appreciate you. All right. Have a good day, bud.
Thank you.
Bye. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Mike and talking about how growth requires change. I want to remind you to go to churchboom.org and check out Church Boom University. It is an ongoing platform for you to be a part of to help increase and grow your leadership. So many incredible tools and resources when you are part of Church Boom University. So make sure to check that out, and we'll see you next time on Fly on the Wall.